we got some breaking news where we could see the end of the Wednesday Night War. An interesting stat with the Raw ratings this week. And we have a new WWE Champion. We talk about it next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. According to a report from an NBC source, as reported by Andrew Zarian of the Mat Men podcast, Ralph, NXT's moving to Tuesday, starting the Tuesday after WrestleMania. Your thought?
I'm pissed, man. I'm pissed because that means another night we're going to have to record or work. And you should be pissed too, because that's going to be more editing for you, I'd imagine.
Well, we could just move one of the days we record to do NXT, or we just do both of them like we usually do and just keep it as is. It just won't be the Wednesday Night War anymore.
Yeah.
How are we going to do it?
I mean, honestly, I think this is what's best for both companies. Look, I mean, it's no secret that AEW has essentially dominated the viewership and the demo since this whole thing kind of started.
Yeah.
You know what? In all honesty, I don't even know if that's the leading reason why NXT decided to move, because for what it's worth, the past couple of weeks, it seems like they've been able to chip away a little bit. It seems like their storylines have been a little more well thought out, a little more involved with some of their bigger names, some of their top guys like Adam Cole. So it seems like maybe they're starting to pick up momentum. I don't necessarily think that it's all because of the viewership and the ratings that AEW has been dominating that they decided to move to Tuesday night. I'm sure it had something to do with it. But you know what? If you're a fan who chooses to watch both of those shows, which I am, I'm happy with this because now I don't have to wake up extra early in the morning to watch one if I fall asleep. I don't have to DVR it and watch it back the other day. I can literally just watch it and enjoy it on Tuesday, watch an AEW Dynamite on Wednesday and enjoy it that way. So for me, from a fan perspective, I'm happy with this.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I'm happy that maybe the wrestling community can unite together like they did with Randy Orton and Soulja Boy and that whole Twitter feud thing, and stop this whole Wednesday Night War thing and this ratings talk and all that stuff. And we could just enjoy the shows for what they are. And yes, you have Raw on Mondays. You have NXT on Tuesdays with Impact if you're watching Impact Wrestling. AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays with MLW if you're watching that. NXT UK on Thursday. You got SmackDown and New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong on Friday. You have a lot of wrestling to go on. And you also have NWA Power coming back too. So there's a lot of wrestling. Even if you're not a WWE fan, you got to be excited that they're moving to Tuesdays, because even if you wanted to watch NXT, you don't have to worry about losing out on AEW Dynamite that week.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's like going to your favorite buffet. You got a little bit of everything, perhaps, and you can load your plate up. You can watch as much wrestling as you want, or you can go right to the dessert trays, and whatever you choose, whatever you fancy. I don't have a problem with it. I like it. I'm just interested to see if we actually find out the true reasoning behind this. If it's has anything to do with AEW, I'm sure that's a little bit of the backstory to it. But does this have anything to do with any influence of any other deals that they are partnerships they have in place right now? So that's what I'm interested to find out down the line.
No, I know a lot of people were speculating this. Even Dave Meltzer pointed this out, and we talked about this a couple months ago, that NBC is shutting down the NBC Sports Network, which means the NHL programming will move to USA. And if that's the case, that means they do their games on Wednesday. And that's probably part of the reason why NXT's moving. And what better way to start that change than the week after WrestleMania? So you have SmackDown on Friday, the 2 nights of WrestleMania, Raw on Monday, NXT on Tuesday. So you have 5 straight days of WWE content for the biggest wrestling fans that there are. So I think it's a smart move. I think regardless if you're an AEW fan or an NXT fan or fans of both, I think you have to look at this as a positive all around, because it ends a little bit of the toxicity that is brought on by the internet wrestling community of which promotion's better in the Wednesday Night War. You're going to get people saying, oh, AEW won the Wednesday Night War. It's going to happen. But at the end of the day, both shows are going to definitely improve because of this.
Yeah, it essentially ends the need to compare the two because they're on the same night. If people choose to continue to compare WWE to AEW, I mean, that's going to happen naturally just because, right now AEW is the second biggest promotion in the United States. So you're always going to draw comparisons between the two, and people are going to argue. And as long as they keep it civil, I don't have a problem with that. I think that having that conversation should be warranted and should be something that's encouraged. You know, if I'm a fan of WWE and you like AEW, I think that we can have a civil conversation and go back and forth as to why we prefer one show over the other. The biggest problem and the biggest bit of toxicity that I think we've seen over the course of the past several months, and it intensifies every week, it seems like, is just the fact that there's so much tribalism and there's such a divide on what's a better show, what's a better product, who's got better wrestlers. And, you know, I'm sure it'll continue to go on, but hopefully not to the extent we've seen it to the point where it's just getting toxic.
Yeah, and maybe this ends the talk about ratings with wrestling fans, because a lot of them think they have an idea of how ratings work, and most of them have no clue how they work, or even if the networks really care, which I already know 3 of the 4 major networks do not care about the ratings that get reported each week. But speaking of ratings, Ralph, Raw had a very interesting show this week. The Miz versus Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship. 9 o'clock. Stay tuned. Nope. Miz cancels. Tune in at 10 o'clock. Nope. The Miz runs out and gets himself counted out. Main event, WWE Championship, finally happens thanks to Shane McMahon making it a lumberjack match. Bobby Lashley wins in less than 6 minutes and becomes your new WWE Champion. Saw a lot of people saying they were not a fan of this. However, there was a big boost in the ratings because of it, Ralph. According to Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, who does a great job analyzing ratings, there was a 49% increase in people 18 to 34, a 65% increase in female 12 to 34, an 11% increase in males 12 to 34, as well as being number 1 in every demographic except for females 18 to 49, where they were second, and 50 plus, which they never come close to winning because of cable news. Were you a fan of the bait and switch booking? And did you tune out? And when did you, if you did?
Was I a fan of the way that the story was told and ultimately how they got to the climax with Lashley winning the title? No, I wasn't. I think that for a casual fan, for somebody who doesn't watch WWE on a weekly basis, I think it would be very easy after the first time they screwed over the fans at 8 o'clock. At 9 o'clock for them to just tune out and say, all right, well, we're not going to get the match. I'm done. I don't know how much that actually happened. But I think that it at least annoyed some people to say, you know what, they're not going to follow up with this, especially after the second time. I felt like as the show progressed, it became more and more unlikely, to me at least. I felt like they weren't going to have this actually happen. I didn't think that the match was going to happen. I didn't think that there was going to be a title change. Even to the point where when that match was going on, I was trying to think to myself, well, what's the out? Miz is not going to drop the title tonight. I know a lot of people wanted it to happen. I know that a lot of people kind of half-hearted expected it to happen, but I just didn't see it. I was like, okay, this will go on until Fastlane. He'll just keep kind of finding chicken shit ways to get out of these matches, whatever way he can. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but the fact that you advertise something and you give the bait and switch, not once, but 2 separate times, you know, that's enough to annoy fans. Now, the one thing I do want to point out is this. The Miz is a heel. The Miz is one of those heels that is supposed to get under your skin to the point where when he wins championships, you see the type of reaction you get on Twitter and on social media. You pointed out the numbers. So those numbers, what do they do? What do they suggest? What do they solidify? The Miz is a heel who people want to see get his ass kicked.
Right.
That's it. He did his job last night. He did his job to the point where people tuned in. They wanted to see what was going to happen. They wanted to see Bobby Lashley kick his ass, take the title, become the champion. And that's what's important. Those are the numbers that actually mean something. So for everybody that went out of their way to try and dismiss the Miz as a champion and dismiss the credibility of the championship, you still watched. People were still watching. And there were certain increases in certain demographics that normally they wouldn't attract, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would lead you to believe that the Miz in this situation did exactly what he was supposed to do, and people tuned in to see the Miz drop the title or get his ass kicked. So for anybody that wanted to try and crap on the Miz for the 2 weeks that he was champion or the week that he was champion or however long it was, he did his job, and he did it to the point where people tuned in to see him lose.
Right.
And that's what you're supposed to do as a heel.
Yeah.
Have people tune in to see you get your ass kicked.
No, I totally agree. And I think there were some people that were tuned out of it. And I saw it on social media, but I thought the number would be drastically much bigger. But believe it or not, like in males 18 to 49, the 10 o'clock hour did better than the 8 o'clock hour. I was not expecting that at all. And total viewership from hour 1 to hour 3 only dropped 100,000 viewers. So either my Twitter is filled with anti-WWE fans, or the IWC isn't as strong as people think it is. And WWE still caters to a casual fan. I mean, we'll see how it follows up next week. Can they continue this? Because they're kind of doing this whole, like, last week they did the hour before The Miz had to make a decision. And then this week it was 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So maybe this is a new style of booking that Raw does to keep a viewer engaged. And it's working for the younger viewer, which we're all talking about. That's the one you got to target, right?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, according to most people, yeah, you should be targeting the younger fan because they can be fans for much longer. They can talk to their parents and get them to buy them tickets and get them to go to the show. So yeah, I mean, you should be trying to attract the younger fan. Yes.
Very interesting to see how Raw develops. And I know in the comment section, people are going to crap on it. I myself was not a fan of the bait and switch like you, but I understand what they were doing with it. And at the end of the day, I think this makes Lashley look dominant, and he has to look dominant for the next 6 weeks heading into WrestleMania. And speaking of that, who's going to be his opponent now that he is WWE champion? Do they go with Drew McIntyre? Do they go outside the box? Do they bring in Brock Lesnar? We recently did a poll on our community page, Ralph, and believe it or not, 57% said they want Brock Lesnar to face Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania. Are you surprised?
Isn't that strange? The same IWC, the same people that wanted Brock Lesnar gone because he was sabotaging the championship, because he did the same moves, because he was too boring, are the same people who are championing, trying to push him into a main event picture title match against Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania. Isn't that funny how it works? When you lose something that you really, once something goes away, you want it back. So all of a sudden, everybody's on the train. They're ready to go to Suplex City. I just find it a little odd. For years, we heard the narrative that...
In their defense, this is a match the IWC have been calling on ever since Lashley came back to WWE. They've been wanting Lashley versus Lesnar, given both their MMA backgrounds. I know, Lashley has his records, and Lesnar winning the UFC championship. Personally, I would love to see it if it ends up in the Fight Pit as a regular wrestling match. I might go a different route, but for the marquee of it all, which is all that matters when it comes to WrestleMania, Lesnar's got to be the guy, I think. And yes, I understand Drew definitely deserves it after carrying Raw, carrying the WWE championship since last year's WrestleMania, never getting that big win in front of fans. He definitely deserves it, but you can have Lesnar versus Lashley here, and heck, have Lashley win, carry that title to SummerSlam, and give McIntyre the win at SummerSlam, where there's probably going to be a full arena at that point.
Well, there might be a full arena sooner than we think, because I think the last I heard today, Texas is wide open. We're open for business.
Yep, Texas is wide open.
The Wild West is back.
Yep, Texas is wide open, and not only that, President Biden saying that the entire country, at least every adult, will be vaccinated by May. So if that's the case, open it up in May. Money in the Bank might be the first, or Double or Nothing might be the first show with a full arena. Who knows? So
vaccines, Fauci, coronavirus, all that stuff aside, let's focus on WrestleMania and the task at hand here.
Correct.
So I am a big, big fan of Drew McIntyre. I think that if there was anybody who deserved the WON award over Moxley for Wrestler of the Year, whatever the actual term of that award is, it was him. He carried the WWE. He made that title prestigious. Now, granted, there were a few bumps in the road with him dropping the title to Randy Orton when he shouldn't necessarily have dropped it. Some could argue that, and I would agree. But he has worked his ass off from obscurity to essentially being one of the very best guys, not just in WWE, but in all of pro wrestling. I mean, last night he even went out there with Sheamus, who Sheamus is still very good.
Mhm.
He can perform at a high level, but you know, in comparison to anything else we saw on Raw last night, I mean, that match was pay-per-view worthy. That could have been like a mid-card to upper mid-card. Hell, that maybe even been something that would have main evented at WrestleMania and been better than some of the main events we've seen at WrestleMania in the past.
Yeah.
So it was a very good match. And Drew McIntyre now is in a position where he finds himself being the same guy that the guys like CM Punk were, the guys like that were the best workers, the best wrestlers on the card, who want to be in the main event of WrestleMania, but they kind of confuse, and not so much Drew, I think, because he's probably realistic about this, but the fans, they confuse what WrestleMania really is. WrestleMania is a massive event when you can try to sell it out. You're talking anywhere from 65, 75, 80 plus thousand people that are going to be packed into arenas, packed into, stadiums trying to sell this place out. Drew McIntyre could certainly headline, and I'm more than certain it's going to sell out.
Right.
But his name doesn't carry the weight and doesn't carry that pay-per-view caliber name and everything that comes with it that Brock Lesnar's name does. There's a certain level of prestige that you're going to get in a main event when you throw Brock Lesnar in there, especially against a guy like Bobby Lashley, who has also a MMA background. You know, Drew McIntyre doesn't have that. So for as much as Drew McIntyre did over the course of the last year, as much as he deserves it, as much as he's proven he's one of the best wrestlers in the industry, if it came down to choosing between Brock Lesnar and Drew McIntyre from a business perspective, Brock Lesnar is the lights out choice every single day, just for the sake of having those two names, Lashley and Lesnar, right? You're not going to get that with McIntyre. As much as you want to, as much as you want to put him in that position as a businessman, as Vince McMahon, the position he'd be in, he can't do it. He just can't do it. Now you could do a three-way, but Lashley and Lesnar is probably the main event that is most attractive right now.
Yes, and maybe they go that route. Maybe they do go with the triple threat and make it Drew, Brock, and Bobby. And if that's the case, who wins and who takes the pin? Because if you have Lashley take the pin, does that derail him? If Lesnar wins, you're going to piss off the IWC. If Drew wins, does he pin Lesnar again, like last year, or does he pin Lashley?
Sasha Banks actually kind of touched on this on her episode of the Broken Skull sessions with Steve Austin. I think too many times we react in the moment, and sometimes rightfully so, but we need to see how this plays out. Like, let's go back 2 weeks ago to the pay-per-view, right? Everyone was pissed off that The Miz won. They didn't want to see Miz in a main event at WrestleMania. Well, Miz isn't champion today, and we're all talking about Bobby Lashley being champion and potentially going and headlining WrestleMania against Brock Lesnar or Drew McIntyre, all outcomes that the fans would be happy with. So it's not so much who loses in that moment. It's what are they going to do with it? If you tell me, okay, Brock Lesnar is going to go over Lashley and they'll do something with Lashley in the future, but ultimately what they want is Brock and Drew McIntyre at SummerSlam in front of fans so Drew McIntyre could get his moment in front of the fans that he was cheated out of because of the pandemic, I'd be on board with that. 100%. Lashley can still be credible in a loss to Brock Lesnar. There's no issue in losing to a guy like Brock. He can be built back up. It took them, honestly, they built Lashley up in a month, I feel like, because as good as he was doing in the Hurt
It's been
business,
longer than that. They've been building Lashley up, if you think about it, since, Backlash of last year? When Lashley and McIntyre first started?
I mean, really going all in on him. I mean, like having him come out and look dominant and throw guys around to the point where it wasn't just like, okay, well, he's a big guy. He looks good. He's winning matches. And you know what? He's the IC champion too. Really pushing him to the point where, okay, maybe they actually are going to do something to them and you actually bought into it. I mean, that started in my opinion, I would say about a month ago where I was really like, okay, well, maybe they actually are going to do something with him. Before that, yeah, they were pushing him, but they push guys strongly and then they just kind of, like Cesaro, they're pushing him, but I don't think he's going to go win a world title like next week.
Right.
With Lashley, if you asked me a week ago, I would say, okay, well, based on what I've seen, I think it's hypothetically possible that he could win the title. So that's what I mean by that. I mean, really going all in on him about a month ago. So,
yeah,
I mean, if he loses the title to Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, there's no shame in that. They could build him back up. Hell, they can even have it where that's a triple threat at SummerSlam.
True.
But I don't want to focus so much on what happens if this happens. Like, what's the reaction from the IWC? Because I think we need to let things play out, and I think fans need to be more patient, because 2 times we're too reactionary to certain things, especially outcomes of matches.
Right. And I say this all the time, not just with wrestling, just with anything in general. We tend to react to the headline without reading the article. And in a case like this, you react to the beginning of the story without letting the story develop and see where it leads to. Now, obviously, a lot of people were upset that The Miz won the WWE Championship because they're believing that Lashley wins and then eventually drops it to McIntyre, where you get 2 transitional champions within a 2-month span, which is totally fine. That's a good argument to have. But let's say Lashley wins and retains at WrestleMania and carries it all the way to SummerSlam. How does that make you feel? What happened at Elimination Chamber? Does that change what your impression was of that? Does that change your opinion on getting the title off of Miz after 2 weeks to put on Lashley if he ends up with a 6-month reign? Let the story develop, regardless of promotion.
To get to where we are right now, they had to get the title off Drew McIntyre. And there's only 2 ways they could have done that. He could have lost at Elimination Chamber or to somebody else after Elimination Chamber in a one-on-one match, or you could have had The Miz cash in. Even though it pissed a lot of people off the way that it happened, considering everything Drew had to do to make that title prestigious, the way it was done is the best way they could have done it, in my opinion, to protect Drew McIntyre, to where, you know, Drew McIntyre could go out there and lose clean to Bobby Lashley. And that's fine. But the way it was done now almost makes it to the point where now fans want to see him get his retribution, or get his revenge, or whatever you want to call it, and get that title back. So, you know, I don't have a problem with the way they did it now, and I didn't really have a problem with it when they did it then. So I just think that fans need to be more patient and let things play out, and not be so reactionary to, oh, well, Daniel Bryan lost to Cesaro twice, he's buried. It's just like, let's calm down. Let's see where this goes. If Daniel Bryan main events WrestleMania somehow against Roman, gets himself inserted into that match with Edge, or something happens like that, are people going to be thinking about Elimination Chamber or his matches with Cesaro? Likely not. They're just going to be happy that Daniel Bryan is in a main event at WrestleMania. So I think we just need to relax, enjoy the ride, and enjoy the content for what it's worth. You know, I know it's not all great, and it's not going to be the best, most, the best well-written stuff from WWE especially, but I think we just need to be a little more patient and let things play out a little bit.
Totally agree. Now, let us know what you guys think of NXT moving to Tuesday. Also, Bobby Lashley winning the WWE Championship and who he should face against at WrestleMania 37. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPV Podcast. Subscribe, hit that bell to join the conversation, and we'll talk to you on the next episode of the Squared Circle Psychobabble.